Hey, it's Vanessa from CraftyGemini.com. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about quilting basics. I'm going to teach you a little bit about the terminology we use and also get you started on a half square triangle block. So first things first, what is a quilt? A quilt is made up of several blocks like these. This is a 9-inch block, and here I have a 12-inch block. Each block is pieced together. What that means is it has a bunch of different pieces of fabrics that are sewn together to make the one block. You see here all these different seams you see, we use 1/4-inch seams in quilting. So in order for all the corners to properly match up depending on your block layout, you see all the points, they're all pointed and none of them are cut off. In order for them to all match, the seam allowance for each single piece when you stitch it together needs to be exactly the same. So that's the 1/4-inch seam that we use when we're piecing a block. Now we have different sizes. You can even have a 2-inch block, 5, 6, this is a 9, and like I said, this is 12. If you wanted to make a table runner, let's say, you don't even have to jump in when you start quilting and start making a huge queen or king size quilt. You can start with smaller projects. This 12-inch block, imagine I had 3 of these lined up, that would make a really cute table runner. So that's a small project that you may want to start off for a beginner. This 9-inch block by itself could even be a pot holder or a hot pad. It doesn't have to be anything bigger. It doesn't have to end up in an actual quilt. What we're going to do today is teach you how to make half square triangles using just 5-inch square blocks. So I'm here to tell you that quilting is for everybody. Even if you're just learning how to sew, just learning how to use your sewing machine, this is definitely a project that you can do. I started quilting only about a month and a half after I even learned how to use my sewing machine. So this is definitely doable, okay? There's no mystery behind it. All it is cutting smaller pieces of fabric and stitching them together. That's all there is to it. So let's get started. Here we have 2 half square triangle blocks. As you can see, it's a square that's made up of 2 triangles. This block, when you look at it, it looks like a really nice design, but all it is 16 of these half square triangles, and the design is made up of how the half square triangle is positioned. If you see here, that's a half square triangle with the blue on this corner. Then you look at this one, it's the exact same block except I matched up the blue with here. The same thing, and then just depending on how you arrange it, you end up with one of these blocks. To make your half square triangles, the first thing you want to do is determine how big you want your fabric pieces to be. In this case, I'm going to make a little fabric coaster, so I decided to go with 5-inch by 5-inch square blocks. Now, what I'm going to do is place them pretty sides touching, just like this, one on top of the other. Now I grab one pin and pin towards one side or one corner of it, just to hold that in place. Now I'm going to turn it like this on points, like if it was a diamond facing me. I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to draw a line from this corner to this corner, splitting it exactly down the center. Now instead of lining up my ruler right there, I need to move it a little to the left to account for the size of the tip of my pencil. Here you can use a water-soluble marker, a chalk pencil. I'm just going to use a regular lead pencil and draw a line right down the center, as you can see there. Now I'm going to put another pin here. And the next step is to sew 1/4 inch to the right of this line, and again 1/4 inch to the left of this line. Here I have 2 different quilting feet. These are both 1/4 inch feet. One is just plastic so you can see through and see what you're doing, and the other one is a metal one. There's even another one that some machines have that actually has a guide, so you just run it alongside your fabric. I like to use the metal one, so that's just the one I'm going to use now. And so you see on the edge of this foot, that's exactly from the center mark where the needle comes in to this edge is 1/4 inch. So all you have to do is guide the edge of your foot along the edge of your fabric to get a perfect 1/4 inch seam. Like I said earlier, we're going to be stitching a 1/4 inch to the right and to the left of this line. So the line that I actually marked with the pencil is what I'm going to line up with the edge of my foot. Do you see that right there? Now I'm just going to stitch all the way down, making sure that this line is on the edge of my foot. And that tells me it's a 1/4 inch. Just like that. And now I'm going to turn it over and do the same thing on this side. Line up that pencil line with the edge of the foot. And I'm going to line my ruler up on the pencil line that we made earlier from corner to corner. Now what you're going to do is slice it right down the middle. And so magically, from the 2 pieces of fabric that we had, we end up with 2 half square triangles. But normally you'd be pressing all your blocks. So what you do is first, as it's closed, just as it was stitched, hit it there to set that seam. And then generally what you do is you're going to push the seam to the side that's the darkest. So since this brown is darker, I'm going to push it so that the seam goes that way. And I'll show you what I mean by that now. You see that when I flip it over, the seam is going towards the brown. And that's what I'm talking about. And you just want to press up and down. Don't swipe it or skew it like that because you'll distort the fabric. We'll do the same thing with the other one. And you see we have these little things sticking out here. This is what we call dog ears. And you just want to trim that flush with your square and get rid of them. To assemble our actual quilted little fabric coaster, we need 2 blocks made up of half square triangles, and we need a piece of batting a little bit smaller than our squares, just like that. So what you need to do now is place your batting square, then place 1 half square triangle block facing you, and the other one facing down. And you can coordinate these whichever way you want them to face. I'm going to switch it up a little and do it like this. So I have basically both half square triangles touching themselves, pretty sides touching, and then the batting square. I'm going to pin around, match up all those raw edges, and pin around. If you've watched any of my previous tutorials, you know that whenever we're sewing a square piece like this together, I like to leave an opening in order for us to flip it inside out. So I like to mark that. I went ahead and did that with a marker so you can see. So I'm going to stitch all the way around, starting at the bottom of this line, going around, and ending up here. Go ahead and trim your corners, just like we do on all the other tutorials that involve a square, just like that. And do that to all 4 corners. I've trimmed all my corners, and I've also gone ahead and left about 1/8 of an inch all the way around and trimmed off all that excess bulk. Remember, whenever we leave this opening to flip it inside out, you do not want to trim the seam allowance here. You're going to need that to tuck it under once we flip it inside out. Now we have to flip this inside out, but notice we have 3 layers. We have one of our half square triangle blocks, another one for the back side, and then our batting is here. Where you want to flip this inside out is in between the 2 layers of your fabric. Okay, if you turn it out here, you're going to get the back of one side and the batting is going to be on the other. You want to do it in between the 2 layers of your fabric. Remember, what I do is put my thumb into one corner, pinch it, push it out. Since this is a smaller project, you're going to have to work with this a little bit more. Just take a couple minutes and do this. Turn it all the way inside out completely and make sure you poke out all those corners. I've poked out all the corners. I want to press this in place now. Just make sure everything lies nice and neat. Make sure that that seam is going right down the center. Okay. Now for the opening, you want to bend that in the same amount that would have been your 1/4 inch seam allowance. Roll it in with your finger. Just like that. And press it in place to hold it. Just like that. Now all you have to do is to quilt it, which means to stitch all the way through all 3 of these layers. So what I would do in this case is to top stitch close to the edge in order to 1, quilt, and 2, take care of this opening right here. And then in the center you can stitch whatever design you'd like. You can do a big X like this. You can do some straight lines, diagonals, anything you want to do, and just quilt on it. I finished quilting my coaster already. All I did was stitch about 1/8 of an inch or very close to the edge all the way around, and then I just did a big X from one corner to one corner and the same on the other side. And that's it. Our fabric coaster is ready to use. Thanks for joining us for today's episode of the Crafty Gemini Show, where we've made quilted fabric coasters. I taught you some quilting basics, some techniques today, some terminology, and also how to make your own piece block. We learned how to make 2 half square triangles out of 2 square pieces of fabric, and with a little piece of batting in between, and you can make your own fabric coasters. Go ahead and make 4, 6, or even 8 of these. Whip them out at your next party for a conversation starter, and set your drinks on. Cheers.